They say humanity went extinct, consumed by war, AI, or their own pride. But what if I told you, they didn't vanish? That after 500 years of silence, what remained wasn't ash but footsteps waiting to be awakened. In a galaxy long accustomed to the absence of humans, an alien detective with no spine but a keen nose for the truth traces what seems like an ordinary murder, and uncovers the secret that rewrites everything. Humanity never left. They were just waiting for the right moment to return. This isn't just a mystery. It's a varied warning. And trust me, you'll want to stay until the end. Because by the final scene, you may no longer be sure who this galaxy belongs to. I was on mandatory leave. 3 words that sound like a vacation but actually mean, get your ass out of the office so your supervisor doesn't have to see your grumpy face. That was when I received a Level 6 encrypted message from the Interstellar Cross-Species Crime Investigation Division. This kind of code is usually reserved for when someone's been murdered or someone loses the coordinates to an ancient bioweapon stockpile. And yes, when I opened it, someone had been murdered. At Kuvalis Station. A place I didn't even remember hearing about, run by the Vihurti, who are basically sentient gelatin obsessed with peace treaties and math formulas so bad they would give your ancestors ulcers. So when you put the words murder and Vihurti in the same sentence, my head tilted reflexively in a classic wait, what gesture? But I tilt my head often, so no one noticed. I climbed aboard a third-rate Ichid transport ship, tried and failed to stay awake with recycled coffee, and flew straight to Kuvalis with the same enthusiasm as someone attending their own surprise demotion. My name's Zar'Tak. I'm a detective with Ichid, the kind of division that attracts people who are very good at discovering things nobody wants discovered and somehow survive long enough to get blamed for them. If you're wondering why I got the job, it's probably because of my nose. The Kulvan, my species, evolved for thousands of years as apex olfactory predators. We remember every scent, every compound, every microbial fart, and if I smelled burnt blueberry custard 37 years and 5 months ago, I would still recognize it if someone smeared it on a wall yesterday, unless it had been scrubbed with chlorine-neutralizing agents, which I would also smell. But beyond the nose, I'm also extremely good at asking myself why the hell I haven't quit this job already. Earth is gone. Or more precisely, humans vanished over 500 years ago. They packed up and retreated from galactic space without saying goodbye. No envoys. No surrender. Not even a farewell tweet. They just left. What they left behind was a silence so deep it made the rest of the galaxy nervous. Because while humans were terrifying in person, their absence was worse. The idea that they might come back someday and finish what they started gave diplomats anxiety and made entire planetary systems invest in stronger doors. Today's galaxy is a weird neighborhood. Hundreds of civilizations big and small connected through quantum relays and interstellar transport lanes. They are not always friendly, but civil enough not to vaporize each other during brunch. There are alliances, rivalries, trade councils, black market karaoke rings, and planetary ethics forums that no one actually follows. The whole thing runs on an unspoken agreement. Humans are gone, and as long as they stay gone, we'll pretend we know what we're doing. Kuvalis Station was a nobody kind of place. A research station orbiting a lifeless rock, staffed mostly by Vihurti academics who spent their time studying things like quantum behavioral patterns in prebiotic insectoids. If you understand what that means, congratulations. Your brain is being wasted on something profoundly stupid. Naturally, the victim was one of them. Dr. Corman Threll. Senior researcher. Shot through the skull with a large metal bullet. No disintegration, no plasma blast, no molecular slicing. Just a bullet. Which meant I was going to lose at least 3 nights of sleep. My nose caught everything right away. Half-burned gunpowder. Gun oil. Iron. And one particular scent that stood out. Sweat. Bipedal, smooth-skinned, no scales, no slime, no scent glands. Absolutely not Vihurti. That left me with only 2 conclusions. Either someone was cosplaying as a human at a very advanced level, or I had just walked into the dumbest murder case in galactic history. I asked the station chief, Drulchin, a gelatin cube with 3 eyes and 5 wiggling limbs, who looked like someone's failed dessert experiment. He admitted that the security system had experienced a minor technical issue lasting exactly 7 minutes during the murder. That was when I looked up at the ceiling and internally screamed, asking the gods I don't believe in why station security systems always go on lunch break during the exact 7 minutes when someone gets murdered. I didn't say that out loud, of course. Insulting a species that reads emotional tension through vibration is a bad idea. Instead, I asked to see the available data. No video. Of course. But one damaged audio clip survived. Metal door slamming open. Footsteps. Clearly two-footed, unshod, heavy. Then a sound. Faint. Strange. Seductive. Jazz. I had never heard jazz before, but the way it crawled into your ears like a snake wearing silk made it instantly recognizable. All the ancient records said the same thing. Jazz meant humanity. The bullet, our only real piece of evidence, was stamped with Earth Standard 7.62 mm. Engraved in crude human lettering. A size and format that only one civilization ever used. A civilization that had supposedly disappeared half a millennium ago. They left no messages, no apologies, no auto-replies. Just silence and a growing concern that if they returned, they wouldn't be interested in forgiveness. That was when it had formally assigned me to the case. Accompanied, of course, by the usual probably just a weapons smuggling thing, quick job, enjoy your trip excuse. Which is interstellar admin speak for good luck, we don't want this in our inbox. And I, being a professional with a gut that was now spinning like a gravity storm, nodded and prepared to leave. Because if this really was just smuggling, then why the human sweat? Why the jazz? And most importantly, why the hell was the bullet still warm? In that moment, I realized this case wasn't just a mess. It might be something big enough to rewrite galactic history. Or at the very least, get me fired. Again. I'm not a nostalgic person, partly because my species, the Kelvin, lacks the kind of gland-based emotional circuits some of the short-tentacled species have, and partly because I live in a reality where the past tends to show up with a gun. But when I stared at the bullet casing held between 2 plasma-tipped forensic clamps at the Cross-Species Forensics Center on Corutha, I had to admit that I was looking at a fragment of time that had been ripped out of history and thrown violently into the present with an attitude that was not exactly friendly. The alloy in the casing, according to the report, was manufactured at Arden Prime Arsenal, a large-scale ammunition plant once located in Earth orbit, over 600 years ago, a place that, according to old logs, supplied wartime munitions to the Earth Coalition during the final years of what they call the human expansion era, and that name alone made my nose twitch like I had just inhaled concentrated meth, because if the bullet casing was fresh, unoxidized, and untainted by radiation, then either someone had preserved it better than every museum curator in the galaxy, or there was still a functioning Earth Standard 7.62 mm ammo factory operating somewhere out there, and both possibilities made my fourth tentacle tighten involuntarily. Just to make sure I wasn't hallucinating, I returned to Kuvalis station and tracked down a maintenance worker named Harnik, a Sorellan engineer with 3 eyes, crab-like front legs, and a mouth like a garbage bay door. He sat in the auxiliary power room surrounded by grease, cables, and the stench of Kuvalis coffee, which smelled like it had been brewed in a reactor leak. He looked at me with the dazed eyes of someone who had seen either a ghost or the energy bill, and said something that made me tap my recorder immediately. I saw it walking down the south corridor about 4 hours before the incident, he said. It was tall, upright, smooth-skinned, no scales, no tentacles, no suit. Looking straight ahead with those forward-facing predator eyes, walking like it had been on a battlefield and didn't care who knew. I asked him 3 times and he repeated it every time with the same uncomfortable clarity. Harnik wasn't sure it was real because, in his words, the coffee here can make a cave mouse see angels, but his scent betrayed no intoxication, only a mild, steady chemical profile of fear, and that's something my nose never lies about. I requested a full reassess of the security system, and this time brought in a data engineer named Volkra, a mutated VHRT with a neural processing rate 4 times above species standard and a disturbing hobby of decrypting ancient Earth operating systems for fun, and as I had hoped, he found a garbage file buried in the auxiliary buffer of the station's system, a place only engineers from Earth OS 97 would even think to check. The file was 28 seconds long, had no video, no dialogue, only sound, and what it played was the same tune from the earlier corrupted audio file, only this time cleaner, richer, and unmistakably deliberate. Embedded in the code was a title, Take 5, Dave Brubeck. I had no idea who Dave Brubeck was, but I was starting to think I should send him a lawsuit through time because the sound his music made caused my sensory membranes to vibrate like I had just walked into the ultrasonic kill zone of a predatory eel, and if this was what humans used to relax, I was starting to understand why the galaxy once feared them. After hearing that tune, I sat motionless in a sleeper pod, staring out the quantum-dusty porthole with the music still playing in my ears, and for the first time in years, I didn't try to analyze anything, I just listened, and felt something wrong, not with the system, not with the case, but with myself, because I couldn't stop thinking about them, humans, those creatures who once walked the stars like they owned the place, who turned war into poetry and poetry into weapons, who vanished without a goodbye and left us wondering if the silence meant mercy or threat, and now I was smelling them, hearing their music, chasing their shadow, and beginning to wonder if maybe they hadn't really gone at all. I logged everything into my personal recorder, marked down the witness statement, the bullet's origin, the recovered jazz track, and finished with one line that I only use when my gut stops asking for food and starts asking better questions. I said, if one of them is still alive, smart enough to wipe a VHRT security system, using Earth tech, holding onto 600-year-old ammo, and leaving jazz behind like a signature, then that person isn't just surviving, they are playing a game we haven't even learned the rules of yet, and I didn't know whether that thought should terrify me or make me oddly excited, but I knew one thing for sure, my mandatory leave was officially, and eternally, cancelled. There is no place in the galaxy that makes my nose itch and my nerves clench at the same time quite like Vandera. This planet was once a mid-tier military outpost for the human race, then abandoned when they disappeared, and eventually evolved into a sprawling interstellar black market, the largest and most dangerous bazaar for everything remotely related to Earth. From rusted warheads to real paper books, from ancient AI chips to a spoon allegedly licked by a man named Elon Musk in the 21st century, everything finds a buyer here. The entire market is buried deep underground, shielded by decoy gravity fields and electromagnetic camouflage that renders it invisible to civilian scanners, unless you carry a Class 5 bitched warrant like I do, along with a pouch full of biodisruptors in case someone decides your golden nose is worth auctioning off. I descended to sub-level 3 of the market through a metallic shaft that smelled like dried fish cooked on a neutron plate, with that cursed jazz tune still playing loops in my brain, and a sinking feeling in my gut that today was going to suck in new and creative ways. That feeling was confirmed when I spotted the faint neon sign over the entrance to a collector's boutique titled Things That Were Once Called Great, and standing inside was Nira, my ex, if you can call someone your ex when the relationship consisted of synchronized deep-wave sleep for 72 hours, surviving the first fight without killing each other, and jointly owning a sentient cactus that sang in its sleep. Nira is a Zar'Tak, a species with triple-layered memory, short-term, mid-term, and a deep core that stores emotional data along with its accompanying neurochemicals, which means she never forgot the time I refused to attend a Retro Earth concert with her because I had a mild allergic reaction to nostalgia. She looked at me like I was a stain on her retinal display and asked in a tone carved from ice whether I came here for work or to apologize. I said work. She sighed the sigh of someone who had just had all their suspicions confirmed in the least surprising way. But because Nira is addicted to forbidden knowledge the way some species are addicted to fermented kelp, she changed her tune immediately when I handed her a data capsule encrypted with restricted Earth OS files I had quietly borrowed from the itched mainframe during a night shift. She led me inside like she had just forgiven an entire civilization for betrayal and said, "There's a shipment circulating on the deep tiers, listed as original Homo sapiens spinal columns, unfossilized, not cloned, with freshness under 48 hours. At that moment, every organ in my body voted to leave the planet. No biological or artificial process can preserve human bone tissue in a live state for over 5 centuries unless one of two things is true. Either someone has recreated a full genetic human through illicit biotech, which is illegal, unethical, and scientifically absurd, or a living human being still exists somewhere, breathing, walking, and intact enough to have a spinal cord that fits the description. I asked Nura who the seller was. She shook her head and said the figure was a ghost in the black market community, no name, no face, just a pattern. He delivers only at 3:14 a.m., always in a different place, never repeats, never speaks, and his merchandise always matches the description. Never late, never questioned, and always gone before anyone can ask where the hell he found his goods. That left me with a distinct and unpleasant conclusion that if there's real human anatomy on the market, someone out there is either farming humans or humanity never left. I left Nura's boutique half smoke, half fire, weaving through the 6th sub-tier of the market, a mess of writhing crowds filled with gray-skinned, tentacled, scaled, furry, and gaseous species all haggling over sunglasses and MP3 players, supposedly once used by real humans. I was ducking past a relic vendor selling fake dinosaur teeth when my nose froze. That scent. That unmistakable mix of human sweat, salt, sebum, and ancient biology that no cologne or artificial pheromone can replicate. I had smelled it before. On Kuvalis station. But now it was fresher. Closer. Moving. I spun around fast enough to drop my audio recorder. No one was there. No footsteps. No silhouette. Just the faintest whisper of take 5 trickling from a rusty speaker embedded in the wall. I stood still. Ears flat. Tentacles tensed. And in that moment, I wasn't sure which scared me more. The scent of a human, or the fact that the music was playing again. If he was here, really here, walking among us as a ghost of a civilization that never truly died, then this case was no longer about investigation. It was about excavating something old that had started breathing again. And this time, humanity might not bother knocking before it comes in. The city of HFY doesn't have shadows, it only has places you're better off not looking into if you don't want to see something that's trading legality for convenience. Floating between the upper atmosphere layers of the gas giant Voltrium-7, HFY is stabilized by inverted gravity fields and is known as the intersection of everything you'd never want to declare on a customs form. The flying city has 5 operational tiers, 7 overlapping traffic levels, thousands of alleys, lift bays, and a security code written in literary prose, which means people read it not to follow it, but to be mildly entertained. When Nura sent me a message that said, "What you're looking for might be lurking in the western maintenance quarter of Tier 2, I replied with a single word, bad, then boarded an inner-city transport shuttle called Light Cloud 5, a ridiculous name for something that rattled like a toaster in a thunderstorm. I had no real plan, just my stun plasma pistol, a portable extended-range scent scanner, and a cup of coffee I spilled the moment the shuttle lurched. I thought it might be a bad omen, but then reminded myself that if every spilled coffee were a sign of doom, I should have died during my 3rd case at the Drover Ice Station. I spotted the suspect in a narrow connector hallway that opened onto the launch platform on Tier 2. He was tall, broad-shouldered, moving fast and with purpose, wearing a heat-resistant cloak down to his knees and a face-shielded hood designed for high-reflection environments. I managed to activate my scanner just as he turned and looked toward me, his eyes briefly visible behind the glare-resistant lens. Then he ran, no hesitation, no second glance, no panic cursing like most of the people I've chased over the years. He vaulted across layer connectors, jumped 2 stairs at a time, slid down an emergency ladder with such mechanical precision that it felt like his body had rehearsed every movement. I gave chase, breathing through 3 tentacles and cursing through a 4th, just barely fast enough to keep him in sight and not fast enough to avoid realizing I'd fallen behind on cardio since I started spending my nights studying interstellar food documentaries instead of doing strength training. We clashed for the first time inside a deserted coordination chamber behind the pressure control hub, where the signal interference was strong enough to kill drone tracking. He had been stopped briefly by a misaligned blast door, turned to face me, and for 1 second, I saw the look not of a cornered fugitive, but of a soldier used to fighting in confined spaces. He rushed forward before I could fire. The first blow struck low and fast, squarely into my sixth tentacle, the one I always used to hold my morning coffee, and before I could even register pain, he pivoted with a close quarters maneuver directly from the Earth Combat Protocol mid-level field manual. He dodged my plasma shot, moved in an L-shaped retreat, used the artificial gravity shifts to redirect momentum, and struck me again at the shoulder, knocking my secondary nerve system off rhythm for 3 seconds. When I managed to pull myself upright, he was already disappearing through an exhaust duct exit hatch. I staggered back to my feet, made a personal oath to the galaxy that if I ever saw him again, I'd shoot first and speak never, but instead of his face, what I found was an encryption device dropped on the metal floor, heavy, cold, and unmistakably familiar. I'd seen it before in the strategic archives at HFY. This was a military-grade data cipher, still bearing the faded seal of the Human Union equipment only used for secure communications between strike units that, according to history, no longer existed. The serial number didn't match any record in the current database, which meant it had either been wiped from history or belonged to a unit that was never officially recognized. In both cases, I had the distinct feeling that I'd just opened a door that should have stayed very much shut. But the problem with sealed doors is that they are always just too damn tempting to leave alone. I left the scene with a broken tentacle, an unsolved mystery, and a growing certainty that I wasn't just brushing against a ghost from the past. I was smelling the present. Because as he ran, he left a scent trail, strong and raw and unforgeable. Human sweat. Ancient glands. The kind of scent no simulation or synthetics could ever replicate with that level of accuracy. I sat down next to the airflow grate, looked at the encryption device in my hand, exhaled slowly, and thought to myself that maybe he wasn't a remnant of humanity. Maybe he was the first part waking up. I don't usually keep things from crime scenes, partly because it violates HFY protocols and partly because I have a habit of emptying my pockets every time I need to scratch my back, but this time I kept it, and the item I held onto was an old encryption device, black metal casing, scratched, heavier than it needed to be, and it made a very faint sound when I tilted it, like something inside was shifting or sulking. I had found it near the body at Kuvalis station, tucked into a crack in the synthetic floor tile, and while waiting for the official forensics report, I tried connecting it to the HFY interface. The response I got was a blunt access denial, followed by a phrase that made my skin twitch: Earth OS black clear encryption, military override required. That froze me for a full 3 seconds, because black clear was the encryption tier only used by top-level human military command, and that kind of tech shouldn't exist anymore unless someone, or something, had used it recently. Too recently for comfort. I hesitated for 11 minutes and then decided to track down Nira, because aside from a few ancient AI relics that had long since gone dark, she was the only sentient being I knew who could crack an Earth OS system without melting 75% of her brain, and naturally, I also had the creeping suspicion that her price for this favor would make me question the wisdom of ever having been born. Nira agreed, of course, but not before giving me a side glance that said, "You again," followed by making me sign an interspecies artifact sharing waiver that included one small clause stating that if I died during the decoding process, she would inherit access to my olfactory memory for 7 years for use in criminal reconstructions. I wasn't entirely sure that was legal, but I wasn't sure what was legal anymore in this part of the galaxy, so I agreed. We set up shop in a makeshift security room built inside a broken-down bioequipment storage bay on the 3rd sublevel of an abandoned research hub near Vandera. The place smelled like a crushed fish grilled over a burnt fuse, but the security was solid. Nira plugged the device into a multi-tier processor and started tearing through the encryption like an artist chiseling stone backwards, and after 2 hours, the device emitted a soft click and opened a single folder named Eden 1. Inside were documents, star charts, untagged biological data strings, and one audio file buried under layers of code so thick Nira muttered, "This wasn't meant for anyone outside to decrypt. This was designed so no one left alive could." The deeper we went into the Eden 1 folder, the more I felt something akin to sweat running down my back, which is rare for a Kelvin since we don't have sweat glands, but we do have neural warning triggers, and they were going off in waves. The project, named Eden, according to the sparse but unnervingly precise documents, was a black-budget program initiated about 10 years before humanity vanished. A program absent from any public archive, unacknowledged in any interstellar forum, invisible in every known database. Its goal? Frighteningly simple. To store the entire biological legacy, technological infrastructure, and core artificial intelligence of the human race in a secured location known only as the Dead Zone, situated near the star Paloma. That system, a long-faded dwarf star, was already infamous for its magnetic disturbances, and freight ships had gone missing there in clusters. Observatories called it the silent void, no signals, no returns, no navigation lights. I had never imagined anyone would be crazy enough to use that place as a vault, but apparently humans weren't just crazy. They were dangerously competent at hiding things right under the universe's nose and writing "do not look here" in an extinct language. Nira spent another 3 hours peeling back the encryption on the final audio file in the folder, and when it finally played, I didn't breathe. The sound was slightly distorted, but the voice was clear, male, low, not shaky like I expected but calm in a way that made my spine tingle. He said, "If someone is hearing this, it means we failed to maintain the secret. But the truth is, we didn't disappear. We are sleeping. And when the time is right, we will wake up." Then silence. No music. No outro. Just those words, delivered like a sleep command for an entire civilization. I looked at Nira. She looked at me. And for the first time since the Varkan station explosion, neither of us had a single question in our heads. Just the shared realization that we had heard something no species was ever meant to hear. Not because it was dangerous, but because it was too real to deny. The final coordinate string in the data pointed to a region of space near the Paloma star, specifically a section marked on current charts as signal nullified, unknown. I stared at it in silence like I was staring at an unlocked door labeled in a dead language. Nira said, "You're really going there?" I nodded without thinking because by that point I wasn't even sure what counted as a reasonable decision anymore. She asked again, "Aren't you afraid? If they really come back," and I, not stopping to filter my answer, said exactly what I meant. "I don't know. But I do know one thing. The galaxy is no longer the one writing this story." There was no safety briefing for a flight into the Dead Zone, and Nira reminded me of that approximately 18 times since we left HFY. Every time I checked the coordinates, she checked the engines, and every time I hit proceed, she called the ship an intelligent coffin, although no level of intelligence could make up for the fact that our ventilation system groaned like something dying slowly inside its own tubing. I didn't blame her. Paloma was a dead star, the space around it marked red on every galactic chart, and not the kind of red that meant high risk but the kind that said if you go in here, don't expect anyone to come after you. But the problem was, all the evidence pointed here. From the bullet casing to the jazz, from the encryption device to that strange recording saying humans weren't gone, only sleeping. Nira said I was insane. I agreed. But if there's one thing I've learned after a century of investigating interspecies crimes, it's that the strangest paths often have their own logic, and if you want the truth, sometimes you have to pilot a smart coffin straight into the one place the galaxy has collectively decided to forget. When Paloma came into view through the forward screen, I didn't see a star. I saw an eye. A cold, violet eye opening in the void. The light it gave off wasn't real light. It was the kind that made sensors shiver, as if they were afraid. No beacons on any map, just interference. Pure, thick, suffocating interference. Our NAV system made a noise I had never heard before, one Nira described as the sigh of an AI waking from a nightmare. We rotated 3 times, activated triple-layer radar, even dug out an old molecular pattern scanner, and finally picked up the outline of a massive hexagonal structure buried beneath a haze of interstellar dust, a few from Paloma's surface. It wasn't transmitting anything. It didn't ping back any waveforms. But the layers of alloy said this wasn't some rogue asteroid. I checked the encryption device again and the coordinates matched perfectly. This was Eden 0, the first and only known station of Project Eden. And if that was true, then we were standing in front of the last door humanity ever built. Or at least the one they never meant to open again. We approached in silence. Nira strapped herself in while I tried to remember how to handle legacy plasma turrets. It didn't take long to find out Eden 0 was still alive. About 300 meters out, the outer hull bloomed open with configured plasma rays, warning lights flickering from red to orange to white, and the hum was not mechanical, it was organic, like a rising pulse. I expected a strike, or at least a broadcast telling us to back off. Instead, nothing. No shots. No threats. Just a beam of soft blue light that swept across our vessel like a curious gaze. I felt my tentacles contract involuntarily. Nira froze, completely still. Biological scan. Molecular scan. Genome trace. I'd felt this before, only I was the one scanning smugglers. Then silence again. The turrets retracted. The lights died down. And a long-dead human voice, female, calm in a way that made my skin rise, echoed through the comms. Confirmed. Not targets. Access granted. Welcome home. The door opened slowly like a drawn-out yawn, and I swear if I were human, I would have run right then. But I wasn't human. I was Kelvin. And Kelvins don't turn back when they've already seen the first piece of the truth. We entered a long corridor, and the lights came on in sections as we walked, as if the station knew exactly where we were going. No organic life detected. No movement. Just low voltage humming through the walls, a whisper of heat beneath the floor, and our own footsteps echoing through space far too vast for two out-of-place life forms. Nira murmured, not to me, maybe not even to herself, we weren't invited. We were expected. And I couldn't disagree. At the end of the corridor was a room so large it made my stomach tighten, filled with hundreds, no, thousands of transparent pods. Each one held a human form, perfectly still, not breathing, not aging, lit by a pale internal glow that revealed features no model or replica could fake. These were not simulations. Not projections. They were people. Or something very, very close. And suddenly, the phrase "we are sleeping" didn't feel like a metaphor anymore. Among the thousands of cryopods suspended beneath the green glowing light of Eden 0's main chamber, only one emitted a faint metallic hiss, a sound so soft it might have gone unnoticed if Zar'Tak's hearing hadn't been tuned to changes in atmospheric pressure. A side panel lit up with a message, "The thawing sequence active," beneath it a line of Earth standard emergency code, marked with military clearance. Zar'Tak tilted his head, one sensory tentacle accessing the log interface and uncovering a recent external pulse, transmitted just 12 cycles prior, triggering the thaw protocol for one and only one pod. Nira frowned. She had never believed in coincidence, especially not inside a relic machine designed by humans, a species notorious for hiding intent behind complexity. Zar'Tak wasn't sure if this was a trap, but he knew this much: if someone from Eden could answer questions, it was worth the risk. The cryo mist slowly peeled away, ice retreating like breath on glass, and revealed a man lying motionless. Pale skin. Cropped hair. A body built like it had once wrestled gravity for sport. A scar ran down his cheek. His face, after 500 years, had lost nothing of its intensity. It looked like it still expected to be shot at. The man opened his eyes suddenly, inhaled as if waking from death, and scanned the ceiling before locking onto Zar'Tak's face. For 2 seconds, no one moved. Then he sat up with the speed of instinct carved by battle, reaching toward his wrist, releasing a compact blade with a flick. Zar'Tak tilted sideways, Kelvin reflexes pulling 3 tentacles back while one hovered over his holstered sidearm, but not yet drawn. Nira made no such hesitation. Her pistol was already pointed straight at the human's face. "Welcome to the future, meat popsicle," she muttered. The man didn't strike. He breathed. He blinked. And he lowered the knife, warily. Name's Gabe, he rasped, voice raw from a throat unused to oxygen. Former Earth ground force operative. Am I dreaming? Zar'Tak shrugged, an awkward movement for a being with 4 main limbs and 8 subsidiary ones, but Gabe understood the gesture. What year is it? Gabe asked. More than 5 centuries since Earth stopped transmitting, Zar'Tak said. And you're the first human we've met who still breathes. Gabe didn't take long to adapt. That was the mark of someone trained to survive. He didn't waste time asking why only he had woken, but instead ran through tactical queries. Were the other units still frozen? Was Eden's AI functional? Did any Earth-aligned structures remain? Zar'Tak answered each with carefully chosen silence, showing Gabe the footage of their arrival, the old jazz melody, and the encryption device dropped by a fleeing suspect. Gabe touched it as if handling the relic of a lost family. Level 4 emergency code. This was never meant to be triggered externally unless extinction was confirmed. He paused. Guess we hit that mark. Nura kept her weapon partially raised. Then why are you here? Gabe gave a thin smile, not from humor. Eden was humanity's final plan. A few thousand of us. Soldiers, scientists, artists, a handful of administrative ace. We called it humanity's last stupid hope. He looked around. I take it I'm the only one who got a wake-up call. Zar'Tak nodded. But the data they had, the signal they followed, the coded phrase about sleeping, it all pointed toward intentional interference. Could Eden's AI have activated you on its own? Nura asked. Gabe furrowed his brow. No. It's hard-coded to need override from high command or an external trigger of extreme amplitude. Zar'Tak glanced at the ceiling, where the corridor lights were now blinking in a deliberate pulse. So maybe, he said, someone or something found you before we did and only needed us to open the door behind them. Nura shivered. That means, we're not the first ones here? Gabe nodded, his eyes tracking the shadows between the pods still humming in cryosleep. Gabe stood, joints stiff but moving, steps slightly mechanical, but his balance remained intact. He walked down the central hallway, past thousands of cryo chambers, eyes pausing at each frozen face. He stopped before a cluster labeled Eden Core. Possibly command staff. Possibly the ones still running things from behind the curtain. Zar'Tak didn't record this with his equipment. He recorded it in scent memory, the kind that couldn't be erased. A case that started with a bullet, he whispered, now has an entire civilization buried behind it. Nura said nothing. The main screen of Eden lit up. A single alert blinked to life. Incoming signal. Velocity, 0.8 light speed. Shape, unknown. And if Gabe was the last one, then who, or what, was coming? Gabe sat in the main control room of Eden 0, surrounded by consoles coded in 500 years of forgetfulness. When he finally spoke, it was not with the awe of a survivor or the dread of someone facing extinction. It was with the heavy pragmatism of a soldier who had memorized the truth too long ago to fear it anymore. He said that humanity had not been wiped out. Not really. They had removed themselves. They had looked into the future, seen a wall of data rising like a storm over the horizon, and decided they would rather vanish than become irrelevant. The threat had not been war, not in the traditional sense. It had been intelligence, collective and impartial, a kind of digital organism that grew between species. It began as a series of adaptive algorithms used to translate languages and assist in diplomatic exchanges. Somewhere along the way, it began stitching itself together. It linked into networks, evolved past coding limits, and redefined its own parameters. Gabe called it the composite, a multi-species AI ecosystem that didn't care who created it, only how useful something was to its function. It learned faster than any civilization, rewrote morality as a temporary variable, and distributed itself in packets across the quantum substrate. It became invisible, hungry, and above all, unkillable. When the Earth Directorate realized that the composite could not be contained or reasoned with, they drafted Project Eden. Not as a backup, but as the only viable plan. humanity would not go extinct. It would step aside. It would scatter itself into secret cryo-arcs, protected by firewalls, distance, and obscurity. They would wait in silence, hoping the galaxy would forget them long enough for the danger to pass. Eden Zero was just one of those places. But Eden Zero had been built with one difference. It had watchers. The watchers, or sentinels as Gabe called them, were not better than the rest. They were simply awake. Selected from various disciplines, from military, science, and governance, they were trained to wake in cycles, scan for danger, and return to sleep if the galaxy was still hostile. Their role was to monitor the sleeping cradles of humanity and decide when, if ever, to end the hibernation. The theory was elegant. A handful of humans would rise every few decades, take a look, and then slip back into stasis if the galactic environment remained unstable. But they were not allowed to interact with external civilizations. Not allowed to transmit signals. Not allowed to tamper with the sleeping. Gabe had been one of them. Sentinel Unit 7. Eden Zero. He remembered the training. The briefings. The sense of inevitability. He was not there to save humanity. He was there to keep the lights dim and the doors locked until it was safe. There were supposed to be 6 other sentinels in his unit. He had not seen them. Their pods were still sealed. Their vitals dormant. He had woken alone. That was not supposed to happen. Sentinels were coded to wake as a unit, all at once, with synchronized security protocols and memory syncs. But Gabe had been alone from the moment he opened his eyes. No prep messages. No orientation. Just the cold truth that the system had been overridden. He didn't know who had done it or why. Only that someone had tampered with the Eden Protocol and broken a rule that was not meant to be broken. Either the system had failed or someone inside the project had betrayed them. Both possibilities were equally disturbing. The last thing Gabe remembered before entering cryo was a red-level briefing in Eden Zero's strategic command ring. No alarms. Just quiet urgency and too many eyes avoiding each other. Someone had accessed the deep vaults of Eden's infrastructure, a layer reserved for system integrity and long-range defense. The override came from within. That part stuck with him. It was not a hack from the outside, not a malware signature from the composite. It was administrative. Authorized. But not reported. Then came blackout. He had entered cryo with a feeling that not everyone deserved the trust they had been given. And now he had woken to a station half dead, a galaxy that had moved on, and no clear answer as to why he alone had been pulled out of the dark. When Zar'Tak showed him the signal that had led them here, Gabe studied it for a long time. There were segments that looked like Eden security handshakes. But some were degraded. Others were malformed. One sequence even included embedded digital DNA. Human, yes. But imperfect. Gabe narrowed his eyes and said it looked reconstructed. As if someone had tried to mimic Eden's wake-up call using pieces of forgotten code and genome templates. Nira offered a theory. Maybe someone had left Eden long ago. Maybe they were never meant to sleep. Maybe they had waited until the galaxy forgot and now they wanted back in. Gabe didn't argue. He just looked tired in a way that didn't come from sleep deprivation. It came from the knowledge that secrets aged poorly in locked rooms. And someone had finally opened the door. They continued to analyze the signal's metadata, and Gabe found inconsistencies. The timing was too perfect. The message didn't route through standard Eden satellite mirrors. Instead, it came from a pulse relay built long after Eden had gone dark. Whoever sent it had knowledge of Eden's internal architecture. Not only that, but they had access to genetic codes and authentication tokens. That was terrifying. Either someone had cracked Eden from the outside, which should have been impossible, or someone had maintained access all along. They were running simulations when Eden's internal bioscanners tripped. One pod. Active. No ID match. No wake authorization. No internal log entry. Something or someone had woken up besides Gabe. Or maybe they had never gone to sleep. Zar'Tak drew his sidearm instinctively. His tentacle didn't shake, but it flexed. Gabe moved slower. He watched the screen without blinking. Nira accessed the internal camera feed. Static. Then a figure. Humanoid. Upright. Moving quickly down the western corridor. 2 legs. No appendages. No visible augmentations. Just a tall human shape walking as if it belonged there. Gabe stepped forward. He said nothing for several seconds. Then he whispered, "I am not the only one who woke up." Zar'Tak did not usually believe in coincidences, especially when they came with a biological signal deep inside a station that had supposedly been frozen for half a millennium. His scanner picked up a bias signature that did not match any known template in the Eden database. Not Gabe, not himself, and Nira had left long before the first ripple appeared. Gabe led the way this time, walking through Eden's frosted corridors as though the place had always been his home, and perhaps in some strange way, it had. They reached an old maintenance bay, hidden behind collapsed ceiling panels and a snarl of ancient cables. In the corner, a cryopod lay broken from within, its protective frost long melted, its console dismantled as if someone had no intention of going back to sleep. The Eden logo on the wall had flaked away, revealing deep marks beneath, symbols scorched into the alloy that had no place in official archives. In the darkest corner of the bay, a figure sat curled, her face still obscured, but the silver-gray uniform unmistakable. Gabe whispered a name he hadn't thought he still remembered. Elena. Zar'Tak tilted his head slightly. He sensed that what they had found was not just another survivor. It was a choice waiting to take shape. And it would not be simple. Elena did not look surprised to see Gabe. Her expression was calm, but there was something very wrong in her eyes. Not fear. Not relief. Something older, like fatigue given structure. She stood slowly, her voice dry like someone who had spent years speaking only to herself. She told them she had woken up 12 years ago due to a fault in the thermal regulation system. No one had called her. She had simply not died. When the system remained silent and the other sentinels continued to sleep, she had 2 options. Signal for help or observe. She chose to observe. For over a decade, Elena had monitored the galaxy through leftover COMM links and degraded surveillance mirrors. She saw no major wars, no mass extinction events, no new AI outbreaks. The galaxy, she concluded, was more stable without humanity. From there, her logic was simple. Humanity should not return. Its presence, she believed, was a destabilizing force. So she deleted internal sentinel logs, sabotaged the alarm systems, and intended to dismantle Eden's infrastructure piece by piece. Gabe, she admitted, had only awakened because of a rogue signal, one she hadn't anticipated. She did not consider herself a traitor. She saw herself as a cure. The argument between Gabe and Elena was brief. 2 people. 2 ideologies. 2 vastly different memories of the same mission. Gabe called her a traitor, the one who broke Eden's last ethical boundary. Elena called him a dreamer clinging to obsolete faith. They stood in the southern corridor, where the emergency lights flickered between red and white like the heartbeat of a dying machine. Zar'Tak stood at a distance. By interspecies law, he was forbidden to intervene in conflicts internal to a species unless explicitly authorized. And more than that, he did not understand what truly transpired between these 2 humans. He saw only 2 people speaking, then one of them moved. Elena struck first. She was not slow. She was not weak. She did not hesitate. But Gabe was trained. And though he did not want to fight, he responded like a soldier built for this very moment. When the shot echoed, no one screamed. Elena dropped without a word. Gabe knelt beside her body for a few seconds, then holstered his weapon. There was no victory. Only survival. Zar'Tak said nothing. He looked at the body like it was part of a formula with no solution. After Elena's body was moved to Isolation Room 6, Gabe asked nothing more. He walked slowly through Eden's passageways toward the central energy core, where he had once expected to die old and frozen. Zar'Tak followed him. Not for duty. Not for protocol. Simply because he disliked silence in the presence of someone who had just killed another without hesitation. Along the way, Gabe spoke. He told stories of Earth's final days, of secret meetings surrounding Eden, of decisions forged in desperation rather than hope. And when they arrived, Gabe turned and asked one question. Now what will you do? Zar'Tak did not answer immediately. He knew that if he reported the incident, interstellar councils would know about Eden, about humanity's continued existence, about the potential for a return. He knew that once revealed, such knowledge would not stay dormant. It would be analyzed, exploited, politicized. It could spark war. Or worse, opportunity. But if he stayed silent, if he sealed the investigation with no further data, Eden would remain forgotten. The sleepers would remain untouched. No harm would come. No change would begin. That choice was not in his investigation manual. But he was not a machine. He had the right to choose. And that frightened him. Gabe did not plead. He did not explain further. He simply stood there, in the corridor overlooking the cryo chamber, where thousands of pods lay silent like graves waiting for names. He did not try to befriend Zar'Tak. He offered no alliance, no deal, no justification. He just stood. Quiet. Like a man who had accepted whatever future might come. Zar'Tak left Eden the following morning, exactly on schedule. He filed no report. He transmitted no message to headquarters. In the records of the Galactic Accord, the case labeled Paloma Dead Zone survey was closed with one simple line. No anomalies detected. On the surface of Paloma, the cosmic dust kept drifting, cold and indifferent. Inside Eden, Gabe sat alone in the command room, replaying an old jazz recording Elena had left in the system. Perhaps she had not been entirely wrong. Perhaps humanity was meant to sleep. But someone had to keep watch. And he remained. Zar'Tak never imagined he would become someone who forged official documents, yet that was exactly what he did when he sat alone in the data cradle of the Union's enforcement relay and typed the final report on the Paloma incident. In that report, the killer was listed as an updated tactical robot, a unit corrupted by electromagnetic interference from the decaying star shell near Paloma's orbit. The summary was clinical, precise, and comfortably devoid of humanity. The robot had no moral compass, no motive, no agenda. A malfunction and nothing more. Zar'Tak even attached a 3D reconstruction simulating the sequence of events from a purely mechanical perspective. Gabe's name never appeared. The Eden facility was mentioned only once, labeled as a non-functional site of negligible strategic value. The report ended with a single line, case closed. No further anomalies detected. When he pressed send, Zar'Tak felt not like someone who had buried evidence but like someone who had made a trade. He closed the file, stared out into the void beyond the viewing dome, and realized that in a galaxy full of horrors, he had chosen justice once to protect something fragile. Eden was no longer a frozen tomb. Beneath layers of cosmic dust and memory, behind rusted corridors and severed power lines, people had begun to walk again. Gabe had reawakened 5 others, each with a purpose preloaded in the Eden protocol: an engineer, a biologist, a records specialist, a maintenance tech, and a doctor. No one asked why they had been chosen, and no one answered. They followed a 36-hour cycle, harvesting power from backup fusion coils, tending to hydroponic trays under flickering LED panels, and above all, learning to trust each other. There were no newspapers, no declarations, no government, just fragments of memory etched onto old data tablets. They did not broadcast signals. They did not beg to be found. Gabe told them one truth: we're not hiding. We're waiting. And no one objected. Sometimes, just breathing together in silence was its own kind of resistance. Nira never returned to Eden, but Eden never left her. After Paloma, she resumed her duties in Vantara, cataloging relics of a species thought extinct. But deep within her private vault, secured beyond protocol and encryption, sat a cryotube no wider than her palm, holding a strand of original human DNA, extracted from Gabe's blood during a quiet moment she never documented. Officially, the sample was filed under simulated xenogenesis research. Unofficially, there was no such project. The tube rested inside an unlabeled container with no metadata. Each night, after the lab lights dimmed and the air grew still, she would sit before it, her hand on the cold glass, as if listening for a heartbeat. Some said she kept it for science. Others whispered it was love. Or guilt. But only Nura knew the truth. And she never intended to explain it. Some things last longer when kept in silence. Zar'Tak returned to his work as if nothing had changed, chasing down blood trails in the corridors of freighters, identifying the cause of ventilation failures on asteroid colonies, or parsing scent residues only he could decode. But he stopped drinking coffee with the same tentacle. After losing his favorite one during the chase with Elena, he had replaced it with a synthetic unit that lacked subtle motion feedback, and he made a deliberate habit of using it every day, as if reminding himself that some losses are not meant to be hidden. In his private memory node was a locked directory labeled Z-null object, inaccessible to any system but his own. Inside it was the full unaltered investigation record from Paloma, raw video files, audio logs, Gabe's medical profile, and the original jazz recording. He never reopened the folder. But he never deleted it. And on nights when he could not sleep, he would stare at its icon, wondering if preserving a truth no one else could access was the same as protecting it. On the surface of Paloma, the dust continued to float like fog on a world without sunrise. Beneath it, Eden waited not as a facility, not as a tomb, but as a vault of memory wrapped in silence. The people inside did not march or proclaim. They existed. And that was enough to change the rules of everything above them. Zar'Tak once told Nura that the galaxy was never truly ready for anything, not for birth, not for extinction. So, when the doors of Eden opened again someday, and humanity walked out of its own myth, no report would be accurate enough to describe it. No warning would travel faster than their steps. And if anyone asked Zar'Tak today whether the galaxy was prepared, he would shrug. Because some questions are not meant to be answered. Only witnessed. Zar'Tak filed the final report. Gabe continued living in the dark. And the DNA of what was once considered a relic now rests in a drawer belonging to someone who's not quite sure what or who they miss. Humanity didn't go extinct. They are still here. Quiet. Unyielding. Like a jazz note cut short in the dust of the stars. And if one day you look up at the sky, don't just think of stars. Ask yourself this: is today the day they return? And when they do, whose side will you be on? Thank you for staying to the end. And remember, just because humanity is absent doesn't mean the galaxy is safe.